Firstly, you are the author of this book, The Death of Right and Wrong.
Indeed.
What do you mean by that, the death of right and wrong?
It is moral relativism, which is consuming civil society, really within the Western world in general, certainly epitomized in the United States. It's the idea that you can't judge anyone, that opinions are forbidden, that they're in fact even dangerous, that judgment is not allowed because it might offend someone, that you cannot punish people because, as an example, if you've never walked in their shoes, who are you to say what they do is wrong? It is an effort to isolate special interest groups, furthering the idea that since you can't understand them and you have nothing in common with them, who are you to say that either things can be done better or things should change?
So when somebody speaks up with an opinion on, for example, homosexuality, immigration, racial issues, you're immediately labelled homophobic, xenophobic, bigoted, right-wing fundamentalist. What's the tactic here?
Well, that is, of course, the beginning of what was political correctness, and people thought it was a joke in the 80s, and it's really turned to being the scourge of society. It is the beginning of telling people that having an opinion and voicing that opinion is dangerous, that there's too high of a price to pay to comment on controversial social issues, whereas, in fact, the only way that will make people's lives improve, that will make us better people, is for us to grapple with these issues. Now, what the left, of course, wants is for people to not judge, is to not ask questions, is to not say, wait, I want something better. And the best way to do that is to make it dangerous to speak out. And when it is, Bob, dangerous to speak out, it also becomes dangerous to think about these issues as well.
Can we just define, you use the word left. I mean, we hear the statement, the left and the right. What do you mean by that?
For me, it's very specific, and I identify it in the book because, yes, it could mean something very different to everyone who's listening to this. For me, coming from the left in America as part of the feminist establishment leadership with the National Organization for Women, it's also black power civil rights groups, the Urban League in America, the NAACP, it's gay and lesbian rights groups. In America, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation is an example. Now, these are groups led by an elite. It is not representative of the average homosexual, the average authentic feminist. It's very few people who are the most damaged, with the most to gain by victimhood and isolation, who get fabulously rich and get a lot of power by maintaining victimhood and really relying on a constituency that is mired in victimhood. Without it, those people would probably be selling shoes.
Okay, but in fairness, victimhood is a Christian response. I mean, we're asked to look after the homeless and the destitute and the unclothed and the unfed.
Absolutely.
So what's wrong with that?
Well, there are victims in this world. We know that. And the difference is whether or not you have a Christian perspective, which is really about bringing people up and out and empowering them in their lives, versus the hijacking of that idea by the left, saying, oh, well, you don't need Christianity, we're here to advocate for you, whereas in fact that agenda is reliant on the victimization being maintained. I was educated on the left by being told that my victimhood was my power. And if you lose that, well, what are you then? You're just like everyone else. There is no power, you don't have leverage. Christian attitudes and approaches have made my life very, very good, and I appreciate that. And what I noticed, what I was contributing to on the left, was the antithesis. While I was saying this is what's best for everyone, realizing, in fact, that the idea of continued victimhood condemns women especially, and certainly people of color and others who live on the margins.
So could I just clarify what you're saying? You're saying that whereas Christians might desire to bring somebody out of the difficulty they're in,
yes,
on the left, they actually want to stay where they are.
Exactly. That is the identity. And it literally, for many people, especially Christians, when you, and again, this is not every homosexual or every authentic liberal. I'm a liberal, I'm a homosexual, I'm an authentic feminist. I'm talking about the hijacking by a few who have told the constituencies, your victimhood, your oppression is romantic, your illness, whether if it's AIDS, is romantic, it is about political power. These are things to embrace. The Christian idea is, let us be powerful individuals, in the Christian instance with God, being able to be all that you can be as better people. It is certainly a healthier message.
So, I mean, is it fair to say that a group like, for example, the AIDS Foundation, the problem I have with them is that I believe they're not telling the truth. They won't actually say why AIDS is continuing to be a problem. But are you saying that the reason they don't is because if they did, if the truth got out there, they'd do themselves out of a job?
Well, it requires something that the left doesn't like, which is introspection and judgment. It's about, yes, looking at the fact that AIDS, for many there are people in this world, including drug companies, getting overwhelmingly rich. The wealthy, it's amazing, that rely on the continuation of some of these problems. It also is about, yes, judgment. The issues in the gay community, issues of sexual compulsion, issues of sexual addiction, issues of self-esteem, and if in fact I know from personal experience, you don't change when it comes to your identity, but you can become a better person. That suggestion alone makes people nervous as some kind of judgment, and I think it's the only way we can move toward a better future.
So what, the left not only wants to stay where they are, but they want to normalise what they're doing, they want people to accept it?
Yes, because ultimately the goal, of course, is as you wipe away the church, there's a method to the madness. The left sees itself in groupthink as having sole possession of the truth. It sees itself, its leadership does, as all-knowing. It is essentially God. It should be looked to for help as a big daddy. If people have something else to look to beyond themselves, like God, how can the left be God? So that's why you see in socialist countries this obsession with wiping away religion, because as people know that there is something beyond man, they're not going to look to a political party for all the answers. That is the most threatening thing of all.
You make a statement in your book, and I'd like you to just respond to it. You say this: almost without exception, the gay men I know have a story of some kind of sexual trauma or abuse in their childhood, molestation by a parent or an authority figure, or seduction as an adolescent at the hands of an adult. Yes. Do you stand by that statement? I
do, and my experiences and it's not with every gay man, certainly, and in my experience, and gay men lead a very different life than gay women, by the way. It's a very different lifestyle, very different world. The gay men I know, almost without exception, but there are some, have had that experience. And that experience, and when we grow older, if there's been some trauma, what we try to do is master the things that have harmed us so that we can control them. It's the same argument that women want to be prostitutes. It's their choice. Well, what are you going to do? Who of us goes and lives a life and says, oh, I don't want to do this, and you keep going and doing it? Most of us say, yes, to master our situation, I choose to be here. It's the only way to survive. With gay men, and some women as well, lesbians who are running from violence by men, and there is plenty of that. Childhood molestation, we know there's plenty of that. But what the gay community doesn't want to discuss is a look at what makes us who we are, not necessarily as homosexuals, but what drives us. Who are we? How can we be better? And I'm not even saying it's about saying you're bad when it comes to who you are. But really, as I've dealt and struggled with my own personal issues, my politics have stayed the same. I'm a feminist. I enjoy my life being different as a homosexual. And yet I am convinced and am determined to become a better person in the process. So when the church tackles the issues of homosexuality, tackles the issues of prostitution, they get labelled as bigots, right-wing fundamentalists. What should be the response? Because I'll tell you what, it's very good at shutting the argument down. It is. You know, it is almost pathological, the fear of being called a racist or a homophobe, especially when it's targeted at a decent person. Christians, of course, are compassionate people, and you can't prove a negative. And you begin to wonder, well, maybe there is something wrong with me, or I don't want people to think that about me, so it's best to just say nothing. I'll tell you the real homophobia. The real homophobia is ignoring the issue of AIDS and why it is now increasing amongst young men around the world. The real sexism is suggesting that women want to be used like dish rags on the street as prostitutes. The real racism is saying, I'm going to throw money at you even though your poverty and your alcoholism and your problems continue because I throw money at you and there's no personal responsibility. That's the racism. So it's about not being swayed by a bully who doesn't want you to think for yourself. It's realizing that if I don't, and it's also, though, about being conscious. Am I against the person? Christians, I love the approach of, it is the issue, the sin, it's not the person. And I think that that is appropriate because it gets on a fine line of condemning individuals. And I think that that is really the struggle Christians must face, and I think they've done a very good job of it so far. OK, when we come back, let's talk about gay marriage, let's talk about hate speech. Tammy Bruce, my in-studio guest, back in a moment.